how to fix discovered currently not indexed page indexing error in Google Search Console. In this video session, I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot and fix discovered currently not indexed issues on the page indexing reports. Another great tutorial by RankYa, whereby I believe not many YouTubers will be able to explain what this problem actually is and how to fix it. So, because it's picked up by Google systems, so therefore we may look at the reports and say, okay, how do we fix it? Because there is many different avenues that we can follow to fix this problem. This is particularly important for e-commerce sites, because if you have a large e-commerce site with hundreds of different URLs on a content management system that generates various different parts like tags, categories, archives, and this could be a problem with a website, right? So when we are fixing any page indexing errors, always we look at all submitted pages. We want to make sure the website URLs that we've submitted to Search Console, which come from our sitemaps that we've submitted, they do not have problems. As in, Google is discovering them, but it's not placing it in its index. Why is that? Search Console Help section tells us the page was found by Google, but not crawled yet. Typically, Google wants to crawl the URL, but this was expected to overload the site. Now, if you watch other video tutorials by RankYa, I show you, you know what, you can filter things. This is date ranges, you can export the reports. But let's press on an example URL, because we're looking at all submitted pages. And this page, these example URLs, we can open the URL to see, okay, what's going on here? All right, common sense stuff, right? Basically, the page indexing report isn't that helpful regarding discovered currently not indexed status, because it just gives us tools, inspect the URL, but we can see the URL. So why did Google discover the URL but decided to not crawl it as of yet? Now, to be able to fix this, I can't say to you just one answer to it, because of the way the websites are built on internet or the content management system. Let's imagine WordPress works different to Shopify, or Blogger works different to let's say Wix type of store, right? So then, discovered currently not indexed is to do with, well, it's to do with the page loading, but mainly server response. And thus, there could be problems when Google tries to request a URL, because in this example, it's tried to request this URL, but at that moment, perhaps my server was rebooted, or there is an underlying issue with my content management system or the plugins or something. Now, Google actually has tools available for us to say, okay, I want to control how often Google requests the URLs on my website, because Google is highly efficient. That means, let's imagine an e-commerce site with 1,000 products. Well, if let's say 100 people are visiting at the same time, then it would burden the server load and it can't respond back to Google. So thus, Google has discovered the URL, but it's decided, okay, when we're trying to request lots of different URLs, there could be a problem with the server. So thus, Google has just left the crawling and indexing process to a different time frame, so to speak, okay? So I know it could be complex to fix this. I'll just show you the tools available, as in tools made available by Google, okay? So we've got the help section, which really isn't that helpful. Then we can actually change Googlebot crawl rate. Also, Search Console reports gives us the settings here. When we press on settings, we can further analyze how Google is requesting URLs and crawling the site. So under crawl stats here, under settings on the left hand side menu, we can press on crawl stats. We can open the report and quickly take a look at this here. In fact, to be able to fix discovered currently not indexed by Google, Search Console report, this is the one you want to analyze. Here you want to make sure that moved permanently, there isn't lots of them. As you can see, a website can be built using many different technologies. It could have a static HTML or lots of different JavaScript that Google requires to process when it crawls or analyzes the page. So, if you're a web developer, you may say, okay, you know what? Is everything working correctly? Can I optimize certain things on my website? Right? So that's a given. But here, on the crawl stats, we have different options here. You may have videos or images that people can download or things like that, right? So you can explore more of it. I'm not going to go in depth or else we'll be here 10 hours, right? So a great feature for you to triple check is host status. Let's press on that tab. Here we're saying, you know what, can Google request robust or text, acceptable fail rate, everything is great here, but what if yours isn't? Then DNS resolution, which is set up by your server setup and so on. Is that all working correctly? What if it isn't? Then, you know what if you're using, what if you have a website that requires people from different parts of the globe to visit? Then content delivery networks may be of use to fixing discovered currently not indexed problem. But particularly you want to triple check the server connectivity. Also, from your server side, I'll show you some cPanel examples as to where to look. Okay, I've got a typical cPanel open here. You can look at error logs on your website, as in on your server. Because if the server is encountering lots of errors that may be unknown to you, then that could cause Google crawling problem, which then causes discovered currently not indexed issue. So check your web server setup in terms of errors. Are there problems on the server level? If so, then you know what the problem is, then you need to change things accordingly. Also, certain content management systems have bad coding practices, which may slow down the page load and so on. So another great place to check is your website theme error log files. So you check the server error logs and website theme error logs, because all of them could let Google systems crawl differently. That's what discovered currently not indexed problem is related to. It's about crawling. There's a problem with the website in terms of, not necessarily a problem, the website can't handle the lots of different requests, like, a lot of them sent by Google. So therefore Google is saying, you know what, I've discovered the URL, I'm aware of it, I'm going to index it later, as in I'm going to crawl it later, but for time being I've decided to not crawl it and index it. So then what else we can do is As I've said, we have tools available. We can look at the sample examples. Now, if you're experiencing this for all submitted pages and you have lots of different URLs, then you've triple checked the server, everything's working fine. You've checked your website theme, that's working fine. There is no major errors or fatal PHP errors could cause issues. So you've checked the theme, it's all working correctly. You've looked at the crawl stats, because you can optimize JavaScript, you can optimize images, you can optimize whatever the file type you have on your website. Let's imagine a typical WordPress content management system. If you're using lots of plugins, which most of them use JavaScript, all that has to process. So Google can work out, what, this page is too heavy. If we start crawling it, it's gonna just, break the website down, so to speak. It's not gonna break the website down, it's gonna cause additional problems with the website. That's what discovered currently not indexed issue is all about, okay? So I know I'm going back and forth, but that's how it works. For us to be able to fix discovered currently not indexed, because it's coming from Google systems, we need to follow different approaches compared to different indexing errors, okay? So as I've said, look at the crawl rates, take a look at this. If you end up seeing, there are problems with crawl rates, as in here HTML is processed, but JavaScript, let's imagine that was 90%. So then we know it's related to JavaScript, as in it's a burden that needs to be looked at. Then we look at host status. We want to make sure the server can connect to any requests, whether it's your website visitors or Google crawl engines. Then what we can do is look at the help section. Great. Then we can change the crawl rate of Googlebot. Let's imagine you have a large e-commerce site with lots of people visiting, and your server can't handle Googlebot crawling as well at the same time. Then you can actually reduce Googlebot crawl rate. Search Console, Webmaster Tools, you can go into this URL, choose a verified property, and here you have tools available by Google Search Console to tweak around the crawl rate settings. But I would strongly encourage you to actually not use this feature, in a sense that let Google optimize for my website, which is a recommended option. Just remember that you actually do have an option to tweak the crawl rate. Okay? Mainly you want to reduce it. If there is a problem, Google crawling, then you don't want to increase it. Perhaps you want to reduce it. But you can always learn more about it, so I'm not going to go in depth as to how to use this. What I suggest to you is just let Google decide and look at the website in question. Look at the server logs and so on. And also focus on Core Web Vitals, in a sense that if the Core Web Vitals are failing here with lots of poor URLs, that means the page is heavy in itself anyway. So thus Google is deciding, the page is already heavy. If we end up sending additional requests, it's just gonna maybe create problems with the website or the server. Make sense? So let me wrap it up once again. I know I'm talking a little bit fast, but I need to show you a little useful information regarding discovered currently not indexed, because it's coming from Google systems. Once again, you can analyze all known pages in this example, or you can look at all submitted pages. What I tend to do is always look at all submitted pages, because they come from the sitemap that we've submitted, right? As in the sitemaps you've submitted to Search Console should be precisely the URLs that you want to index in Google. And don't just submit a parent sitemap in most cases. Then we've got example URLs. We've got date ranges here. Example URLs, we can open it. We can inspect the URL. Okay, so we can open the URL, visit it. All right, if you're a technical person, let's press on F12 on our keyboard. Let's bring up the Network Developer toolbar. Let's refresh the page and look at the Network tab. This will tell us how the browser is communicating with the web server and the responses that it gets. So here what we can do is we can press on the URL, look at the response code here. In this example, 200 OK is great. But what if we were to do something like this? What if we were to remove the www version? Let me open up a new tab and let me refresh that and do the same thing. As you can see, that has been redirected, right? So what if the server is set up incorrectly in terms of redirecting things? That could place a burden on the server, right? So there is a lot to consider when we fix Search Console problems related to Google systems. Okay, so you can analyze the network tab here. As you can see, for that page to load, there was a lot of things that's loaded. We can also look at coverage tab. I'll quickly show you how to do that. Let's refresh the page. Here you can look at certain JavaScript or CSS files to see, you know what, are they loaded? Are they used on this landing page? If so, can you optimize them? If not, can you remove them from the page load pattern? Okay, so when we inspect a sample URL as shown in discovered currently not indexed reports, here it's saying, you know what, that URL is not in Google, obviously, because Google has not crawled it, hasn't indexed it, so how can it place it in Google? You don't want to press request indexing because that would be silly. You got to let Google do its own stuff. That's why I suggested to you to not use the crawl settings here, unless you know exactly what you're doing or read more about what's going on here. Then here, URL inspection, it says, you know what, page is not indexed because Google has discovered it, but currently hasn't indexed, and we kind of know what's going on here as to where to look. As we can see, there's no crawl information because Google hasn't crawled it. Want to test live URL? Surely you can use this tool, or you can use the network tool. Or finally, before I close up, since let's look at PageSpeed Insights. Obviously, PageSpeed Insights is a tool that analyzes page load and so on. So this could be an option for us to say, okay, is the page really heavy? Is it loading too slow? Because if so, then we know, you know what, not only there's issues with the server settings or website content management theme settings, but the page itself is also heavy. So thus Google is saying, you know what, no, we're not even going to crawl it, let alone index it, because Google systems think it's going to burden the web server. So you can do many things. Mainly you want to look at the server connectivity, website theme not having coding problems, fatal PHP problems when it's loading. You want to look at the requests that's being sent, and you may be able to reduce them. As in, let's imagine a typical WordPress site with 10 different plugins will require at least 20 HTTP requests to just load the page. So then you have to say, can I reduce those HTTP requests? So I know I've bombarded a lot on you, but there is a lot to consider when we want to fix discovered currently not indexed, because that affects your website performance in search, and it's coming from Google systems, and Search Console help section isn't that helpful understanding and troubleshooting this problem. So I hope this video session has been enlightening in a sense as to where to look, how to approach fixing this problem. It is an important problem, especially for large e-commerce sites, because if Google can't crawl it, let's imagine you're publishing new products, you're publishing new content, yet Google can't even crawl it or index it. If that's the case, you need to focus on things like this, as in fix it. I thank you for learning with RankYa, and I'll talk with you in the next video session.